Naam, commander of the kings of Aram's army, was highly respected and esteemed by his master, because through him Adonai had brought victory to Aram. But although he was a brave warrior, he also suffered from Sarat. Now, on one of their raids into Israel's territory, Aram carried away captive a little girl who became a servant for Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "I wish my lord could go to the prophet in Shamron. He would heal his tsarat." And Aram went in and told his lord, "The girl from the land of Israel said such and such." The king of Aram said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." He set out, taking with him 660 pounds of silver, 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of clothes. He brought the king of Israel this letter, which said, "When this letter reaches you, you will see that I have sent my servant Naaman to you, so that you can heal his tsarat." When the king of Israel finished reading the letter, he tore his clothes. "Am I God, able to kill and make alive?" he asked, "so that he sends me a man to heal his tsarat?" You can see that he is only seeking an excuse to quarrel with me. But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why did you tear your clothes? Just have him come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to him who said, "Go and bathe in the Jordan 7 times. Your skin will become as it was, and you will be clean." But Naaman became angry, left saying, "Here, now? I thought for certain that he could come out personally, that he would stand, call on the name of Adonai, his God, and wave his hand over the disease place and thus heal the person with tsarat. Aren't Amana and Parpa, the river of Damascus, better than all the water in Israel? Why can't I bathe in them and be clean?" So he turned and went off in rage. But his servants approached him and said, "My father, if the prophet had asked you to do something really difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So doesn't it make even more sense to do what he says when it's only bathe and be clean?" So he went down and immersed himself 7 times in the Jordan, as the man of God had said to do, and his skin was restored. It became like the skin of a child, and he became clean. Then, with his whole retinue, he returned to the man of God, went and stood before him, and said, "Well, I've learned that there is no God in all the earth except in Israel. Therefore, please accept a present from your servant." But Elisha answered, "As Adonai lives, before whom I stand, I will not accept it." And despite his urging to take it, he refused. So Naaman said, "If you won't take it, then please let your servant be given as much earth as 2 mules can carry. Because from now on your servant will offer neither burnt offerings nor sacrifices to other gods, but only to Adonai. Accept this, and may Adonai forgive your servant for it. When my master goes to the temple of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow down in the temple of Rimmon, when I bow down, may Adonai forgive your servant for this." Elisha said to him, "Go in peace." Naaman had gone only a short distance from him when Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "Here, my master has made it easy on this Arami Naaman by not accepting from him what he brought. As Adonai lives, I'll run after him and get at least something from him." So Gehazi hurried after Naaman. When Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from his chariot to meet him and asked, "Is everything all right?" Yes, he replied. My master sent me with this message. 2 young men have just now come to me, guild prophets from the hills of Ephraim. Would you be kind enough to give them a talent of silver, 66 pounds, and 2 changes of clothes? By all means, take 2 talents, said Naaman, pressing him. He tied up the 2 talents of silver into 2 bags and gave them, with the 2 changes of clothes, to 2 of his servants who carried ahead of Gehazi. On reaching the hill, he took the bags from them and put them away in the house. Then he let the men go, and they left. He went in and stood before his master. Elisha asked, Where have you been, Gehazi? Your servant hasn't gone anywhere, he said. Elisha said to him, Wasn't my heart there with you when the man left his chariot to meet you? Is this a time to receive silver and clothing, and olive groves, and vineyards, and sheep, and oxen, and male and female slaves? Therefore Naaman's tzara'at will cling to you and your descendants forever. He left Elisha's presence with tzara'at as white as snow. The guild prophet said to Elisha, As you can see, the palace where we are living in order to be with you is too small for us. Please allow us to go to the Yarden. Each of us will collect a log there and will build a place there for us to live. He answered, Go ahead. But one of them said, Please, won't you come with your servants? He answered, All right, I will. So he went with them. When they arrived at the Yarden, they cut down trees, but as one was felling a tree trunk, the head of the axe fell in the water. Oh no, he cried. My master, it was a borrowed one. The man of God asked, Where did it fall? He showed him the place. Then Elisha cut a stick, threw it in there, and the iron axe head floated on the surface. Lift it out, he said. So he put his hand out and took it. Now the name of Aram went to war against Israel, and in consulting his servants, he said, I'll set up my ambush camp in such and such place. The man of God sent this message to the king of Israel. Be careful not to go past such and such place, because Aram will attack there. So the king of Israel sent men to the place the man of God had told him and warned him about, and he took special precautions there. This happened more than once or twice, and it greatly upset the king of Aram. He called his servants and said to them, Tell me which of you is betraying us to the king of Israel. One of his servants replied, It's not that, my lord, king. Rather, Elisha, the prophet who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words you speak privately in your own bedroom. He said, Go and see where he is, so that I can send him and bring him here. They told him, He's in Dothan. So he sent horses, chariots, and a large army there. They came by night and surrounded the city. The servant, the man of God, got up early in the morning. On going outside, he saw an army with horses and chariots surrounding the city. His servant said to him, Oh, my master, this is terrible. What are we going to do? He answered, Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are outnumbering those who are with them. Elisha prayed, Adonai, I ask you to open his eyes so that he can see. Then Adonai opened the young man's eyes, and he saw there before him all around Elisha the mountain was covered with horses and fiery chariots. When they came down to him, Elisha prayed to Adonai, Please strike these people blind. And he struck them blind as Elisha had asked. Next, Elisha told them, You've lost your way, and this isn't even the right city. Follow me, and I'll take you to the man you are looking for. And he led them to Shamron. On their arrival in Shamron, Elisha said, Adonai, open the eyes of these men, so that they can see. Adonai opened their eyes, and they saw. There they were in the middle of Shamron. When the king of Israel saw them, he asked Elisha, My father, should I attack them? Should I attack them? He answered, Don't attack them. You wouldn't even attack prisoners you had captured with your own sword and bow, would you? So give them food to eat and water to drink, and let them return to their master. So he provided well for them And after they had eaten and drunk, he sent them away, and they returned to their master. After that, no more raiding parties entered the land of Israel from Aram. But some time afterwards, Benhadad, king of Aram, gathered all his army, went up to lay siege to Shamron. At that time, there was a severe famine in Shamron. They maintained their siege until a donkey's head sold for 80 pieces of silver and a half pint of dove's dung for 5 pieces of silver. As the king of Israel was passing by the wall, a woman cried out to help. "Help, my lord king!" He said, "If Adonai isn't helping you, how do you expect me to help you? There isn't any grain and there isn't any wine." Then he asked her, "What's troubling you?" She answered, "This woman said to me, 'Give me your son so that we can eat him today, and we'll eat my son tomorrow.' So we boiled my son and ate him. The next day I said to her, 'Give me your son so that we can eat him.' But she was hiding her son." When the king heard that the woman said, he tore his clothes. At the time he was passing by the wall, and when the people looked, they saw him there with sackcloth against his skin. Then he said, "May God do terrible things to me and worse ones too, if the head of Elisha the son of Shaphat remains in his body by the day's end." Elisha was sitting in the house, and the leaders were sitting there with him. The king sent a messenger ahead, but before he arrived, Elisha said to the leaders, "Do you see how the son of a murderer has sent someone to remove my head? Look, when the messenger comes, close the door and keep it shut against him. You can hear his messenger's footsteps following right behind him." While he was still speaking, the messenger arrived with his message from the king. "Here, this evil is from Adonai. Why should I wait for Adonai any longer?" Elisha answered, "Listen to the word of Adonai. Here is what Adonai says. Tomorrow, by this time, 6 quarts of fine flour will sell for only a shekel, and a half a bushel of barley for a shekel in the market, at the gate of Shamron. The servant in whom the armed king was leaning answered the man of God, 'Why, this couldn't happen even if Adonai made windows in heaven. Elisha answered, "All right, you yourself will see it with your own eyes, but you won't eat any of it." Now there were 4 men with tzarad at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to each other, "Why should we sit here till we die? If we say we'll enter the city, and the city has been struck by the famine, so we'll die there. And if we sit here, we'll also die. So let's go and surrender to the army of Aram. If they spare our lives, we will live, and if they will kill us, we only die." They got up during the twilight to go to the camp of Aram, but when they reached the outskirts of the camp of Aram, they saw no one. For Adonai had caused the army of Aram to hear the sound of chariots and horses. It sounded like a huge army, and they said to each other, "King of Israel must have hired the kings of the Hittite and the kings of the Egyptians to attack us." So they jumped up and fled in the twilight, leaving their tents, horses, donkeys, and the whole camp just as it was, and ran for their lives. When these men with tzarad reached the outskirts of the camp, they entered one of the tents, ate and drank. They took some silver, gold, and clothing and went and hid it. Next they returned and entered another tent, took stuff from there, and went and hid it. But finally they said to each other, What we are doing is wrong. At a time of good news like this, we shouldn't keep it to ourselves. If we wait even till morning, we will earn only punishment. So come on, let's go and tell the king's household." So they came and shouted to the gatekeepers of the city and told them the news. "We went to the camp of Aram, and no one was there, no human voice. Just the horses, donkeys tied up, and the tents left in place." The gatekeepers called and told it to the king's household inside. Then the king got up in the night. He said to his servants, "I'll tell you what Aram has done to us. They know that we're hungry, so they've gone outside the camp, hidden in the countryside, saying, 'When they come out of the city, we'll take them alive and then go into the city.'" One of the servants answered, "I suggest letting some men take 5 of the remaining horses that are left in the city. They're like everything else in Israel that remains, like everything else in Israel practically finished, and we'll stand and see." So they took 2 chariots with horses, and the king sent after an army of Aram, saying, "Go and see." They went after them all the way to the Jordan and found the entire distance strewn with clothing and other articles Aram had thrown away in their haste. The messengers returned and told the king. Then the people went out and ransacked the camp of Aram, with the result that 6 quarts of fine flour was sold for only a shekel, and a half bushel of barley for a shekel, in keeping what Adonai had said. The king put the servant on whose arm he had leaned in charge of the gate, and the people trampled him down in the gateway so that he died, as the man of God had said would, who spoke when the king came to him. For the man of God had said to the king, "Tomorrow by this time 6 quarts of barley will sell for only a shekel, and a half barley of fine flour for a shekel in the market, at the gate of Shamron." The servant had answered the man of God, "Why, this couldn't happen even if Adonai had made windows in heaven." And Elisha had said, "All right, you yourself will see with your own eyes, but you won't eat any of it." This is exactly what happened to him, because the people trampled him down in the gateway so that he died.